We're back for the second live episode of Design in Good Company. What's new, Randy? How you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Friday. I'm so glad that we moved these to Fridays. It's a great day of the week. It's my second favorite day of the week. Honestly. What's your favorite day of the week, Broderick?
Well, I'm glad we moved
Do you
these to
have a
Fridays
favorite day of
too.
the week?
I think so. I think I really like Saturdays personally, but I'm glad we moved these to Fridays because it's a fun conversation. Love engaging with having great conversations with you, but also the listeners who want to tune in and chat with us. It's a ton of fun. So I do enjoy that. And it's a great way to
Yeah.
end the week, kind of go into the weekend having some fun. But Saturdays for me are my favorite day. I like to get a little workout in the morning, hang out with family, go do something, and maybe, some evening activity, maybe grilling or griddling, cooking. It's just a ton of fun. It's really relaxing for me. And I love, especially like spring, summer, fall, just being able to get outside for most of the day. It's just a great time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
What's your favorite day of the week?
My favorite day of the week is weirdly enough, it's Thursdays. Because you have the anticipation of the next day being the last day of the work week. And just all sorts of cool things happen for me on Thursdays. Like it's usually the night that like I'm doing my like tabletop RPGs. It's the night that like all of the concerts that I've enjoyed that I've gone to in the past have been on Thursday nights. For some reason Thursdays are just, just the best day of the week for me. So
Hmm.
I get a lot of joy out of Thursdays.
On my Thursday nights, I am a part of a Star Wars podcast that we talk about all the content that's come out and we rank it and talk about it. Are you watching this Acolyte show?
I was going
That's
to ask you, should I watch that show? Because I have not watched it yet. And Star Wars shows are so hit or miss. Like, I was just
oh,
like, I had no interest in Kenobi, but then I watched Andor and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing
okay,
blew me
yeah.
away. It was so good.
Yeah.
Should I be watching Acolyte?
So we're going to talk about imposter syndrome today and all of the people who want to do things, but maybe they don't have the courage to do it. Star Wars is one of those things that's kind of makes me think of Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, where he's like, you were
Yeah.
so focused on whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think whether or not you should. And that's Star Wars right now. There's a lot of stuff coming out, and they don't have imposter syndrome. They're very confident. We're putting this out like they're the opposite of what we're going to be talking about today. They're like the last episode on IMDb got a 3.6 out of 10. Now my co-hosts who are like Star
Oh,
Wars influencers, like legit Star Wars influencers are just like it's fantastic, it's great. I'm like, are we watching the same thing? Are you guys afraid to like piss off the people over at Lucasfilm because this sucked? Like it was terrible. So no, I it's only 3 episodes in. Maybe my mind will be changed by other things. Andor was fantastic. The rest of it's fine.
yeah. Yeah. This idea of like, are you good enough to do the thing that you're doing? Like, like just said, look at the Star Wars franchise. There's a lot of people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, but they're still doing it. There's this sense sometimes that like, am I in the right place? Should I be here? Should I like, be doing this thing? And
Mm,
imposter syndrome sometimes makes us feel, as if we don't belong. And the reality is that if you were hired for a job, that's because people think that you can do that job. And
yeah,
guess what? You can actually do that job. And
maybe.
it, yeah. Well, I mean,
Hopefully.
okay, the Star Wars example definitely leans into a maybe.
Yeah.
But like I know myself, I've had imposter syndrome and self-doubt like all the time. It's hills and valleys for me as I like go through my career. Uh
Mm.
Broderick, have you ever had imposter syndrome? You always hop on the microphone and you're so confident. Like I can't imagine you
Yeah.
feeling like you're an imposter.
Never. I just, I'm really one of the things I love about me is I'm great at everything. including my
Oh,
belief in
the
myself.
humility you're just fantastic at. Just
I have the most
top-notch
humility.
humility.
Huge. The most humility, the best, only the best. No,
Huge.
no, there's plenty of moments in my life where I am feeling like insecure about something and, oh, why am I here? A great example is like I'm not like the tallest person in the world. And I remember when I started like prioritizing like going to the gym and seeing people like who especially after because I did basketball and different sports growing up, but when I'd taken, like, a year off, the idea of you just going back in that building and seeing all these people who are just in great shape was really, like, intimidating for me, and it's funny too because I was probably, like, 22 at the time, still in good enough shape, but in my mind, I played up that I was so much worse than I actually was, and it was like, "Ah, don't walk in there, these people are gonna judge you," whereas probably no one's thinking about you, and
No.
just go in there and put in these reps. But it's interesting timing too that we're talking about this. Literally right before this call, I was just talking with a friend of mine about a job that's this person's doing, and yeah, like I've got imposter syndrome about this thing. And for me, what's interesting, like going back to that gym example, I've kind of learned just like literally when you're putting in the reps with anything, you just kind of gain confidence over time. And you also learn
Mhm.
that hills and valleys thing you were talking about. It's like, yeah, you're gonna run into stuff that's gonna knock you down a peg. But then like get ready to shoot more shots because there's probably more reps coming. And so just keep putting in the reps, keep putting in the time, and that's how you're gonna get better and better and better. But yeah, doing things that are new that first time, totally understand why it's scary. And there's like even for me, there's still times where I'm not saying it's not scary. Talked about it before. Like I don't do as much like speaking on stage as other people do for public speaking. And when those opportunities do come around, the first few minutes, I've got butterflies. Now, I don't have as much of that imposter syndrome, but I'm like, oh wow, like this is happening. So you put in the reps, it just gets easier just like anything else.
Yeah, one of the things that like, so let's continue with this going to the gym metaphor. When you go there, you see all of these people who have this level of expertise, like not only physical prowess but expertise, like understanding that like using the giant weights isn't what you really want. You want the low weights to make sure that like you're getting the form down, or like the various like the way that they're like, okay, I am counting my macros for food to make sure that I am like an efficiency engine on food. And watching all of those people with that level of expertise, it's like, should I even be here? Like, am I really working out? Like, am I really doing the right thing? Like,
Yeah.
it's like I'm going to Long John Silver's after this. So, like,
Wait, what?
like
No,
how,
that's
like, am
always a
I?
bad decision
uh,
anyway.
uh,
Hold on.
It is.
There's
It is. Actually, my family forbids me from going to Long John Silver's.
good. We want you
Um,
to live.
yes, yes, I know, but like, listen, hush puppies, hush puppies,
Okay.
they're great. But yeah, it's
I didn't even know Long John
whenever
Silver still existed.
they do. Fun fact, I was fired from a Long John Silver's. So,
Whoa. Okay, hold on.
I
What's that
was
story?
yes, so I did not have any imposter syndrome as a cashier at Long John Silver's.
That's good.
I have a very
I'm glad.
big personality, and
Yeah.
I did really well with the customers and my job, and like I pay attention to detail. Even a job like Long John Silver's, I did a good job. But the reason that I got fired is that this woman comes up and she's like, "Hey, this popcorn fish doesn't look good." And I looked at it and it did not look good. And I'm like, you know what, ma'am? I will bring a fresh like a fresh batch out to you to your table. You can go ahead and sit down. And I turned around. There's like this little tiny window. And behind the window, my friend Tina was the cook in the back. And I looked at my friend Tina and I said, listen, I said, this fish looks like shit. I said, get me something better than this. Like just goofing around with her. Well, I turn around. The woman is still at the counter. And I was just like, ma'am, if you go ahead and sit down, I'll go ahead and bring it to you. I didn't even think anything of it until several days later. That woman called the Go Fish line, 1-800 Go Fish, to specifically complain about me swearing about the bad food.
Oh
So
my gosh. I was about to say, like, oh, were you in trouble for offering like good customer service to just be an advocate before they even asked for
no,
more? Wow. Was her name
no,
Karen?
no.
Hold on. What is this?
Immediately fired. The manager was like, "I can't give you a warning because our corporate policy is if someone complains about you on the Go Fish line, you're fired." Like, period. Like,
That's
there
a
was
bad
no like,
policy.
it is because I would have worked there probably for the next couple of years. Ultimately, it turned out to be good for me because I ended up getting a job at the local movie theater, which was that I have
Oh,
a
okay.
whole host of stories, but I got to see a bunch of free movies. So ultimately, like getting
It all
fired
worked
was one
out.
of the best things ever.
That's okay.
So,
So that is so funny. I got fired from a Hyatt because someone called and complained because the Hyatt had a policy where if you had so many complaints or whatever, you got a free night. And this guy straight up told me, he's like, I'm really sorry. I'm gonna call and complain about you though. You've been great. And I was like, what? And then he shut his door as I like helped him to his room with his stuff. And yeah, I got fired. So the Hyatt, that was a policy back in 2014 anyway.
well, that's the way it goes. And this fear of being fired is part of
Yeah.
what like leads to imposter syndrome. It's like, listen, am I going to be good enough for this position? The people who I'm with,
Mm,
am I running with am I a fast enough gazelle to run with the other gazelles in Africa? And,
mm,
I personally, to help overcome that, because I know I bring like certain skills to the table, like when I'm part of a team, but I
mhm,
also know that there are things that like I'm not quite as good at. Like, for instance, I just attended a workshop on how to improve your sitemap. And I took this like webinar, the several hour webinar, because I'm working on projects and I wanted a refresher because it's been a long while since I've done something like that. And so like one of the ways that I kind of compensate for my imposter syndrome is I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly pushing and trying to find those areas where it's like, okay, I need to be able to speak fluently about this. I need to understand at least like a rudimentary level. And so I need to be constantly learning. And so
mm,
like I do that. When I got the job at Four Kitchens like 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago now, I was I work with a lot of smart people, but they have like just the engineering expertise is amazing. And I needed to be able to speak their language because I want them to do really crazy design things.
mm,
And I need to be able to convince them to do that. And so I have to speak their language. So I learned a lot of like technical things so that I could like say like, well, this could be accomplished if we did it this way. And then the front end engineers would be like, oh, this person has thought about the challenges from an engineering perspective. Um, Now I have to, we can have a conversation about some of these crazy things that I want to have done. And so I find that like that learning and being able to speak the language and
mm,
being able to like kind of keep up, like I'm not going to do any like Drupal engineering, but I can speak very well to it, and I understand like
mm.
a lot of concepts. So I
Yeah.
don't know, like that's one of the ways that I like face like imposter syndrome. And one of the things that you mentioned, Broderick, was like public speaking, and
Mm,
like, sometimes there's a little bit of fear around public speaking. Um, one of the things that one of the fears that I have in my imposter syndrome manifests is like being perceived as inadequate. Like
mm,
I'm not good enough, and so basically I use this to like push a little bit harder into the work that I do to make sure that I like explain my thinking. I do a lot of fact checking. I do a lot of like legwork. Like I think there's a quote or an interview with like Kobe Bryant, who's like, "How are you so like calm on the basketball court?" And it's like, because if I have to do it until like it's completely internalized. I have to do it until I burn
mm,
away all of that nervous energy. And it just leaves me with knowing like I know exactly what to do because I have practiced everything.
mhm,
And so like to help compensate for imposter syndrome, like I lean really heavily into this. I'm like, okay, I have this idea, and I talk to a bunch of people about it. I do some research, and the ideas are stronger for that, and it makes me look good because I've done a bunch of research. I
Yeah.
I don't know, like, is there anything like that that you do? Like, I know you mentioned imposter syndrome isn't a big thing, but like, I don't know. Do you have any examples of stuff like that that you might do?
Yeah, I mean, I think about using the Kobe Bryant example, um, I grew up loving just especially 2000s, like basketball, and was not a Kobe Bryant fan like at all. Was a San Antonio Spurs fan, but hands down, I mean, everyone knew he was when he walked onto the court, he was typically the greatest player there. And it's interesting because we do think back on Kobe Bryant now, and whether people love him or hate him, most people recognize he was a great basketball player. But what's interesting that we don't really remember is he, especially for like where we really think about him winning championships, he wasn't as athletic, which is, I mean, yeah, he was still 6'6" and he was strong, but what really set him apart was his footwork. And there was an interview where Phil Jackson was asked, as the coach, who's better, Michael or Kobe? And he ended up saying Michael because Michael could palm the ball and had bigger hands. And then next thing you know, there's these videos of Kobe doing these hand workouts, right? And so Kobe was always living in Jordan's shadow, where Jordan was a better athlete, could jump from the free throw line, all these things. Kobe worked so much harder. And I actually interviewed a guy who was a coach for the Suns, and he had mentioned how that Kobe had won a championship, and that later that evening, it was like 4 a.m. He went to a Gold's Gym, and there was Kobe shooting around, getting ready for the next season because there was just stuff he was obsessed with perfection, probably to an unhealthy degree. But these are some of the things I think about when you're talking about planning and processes and practice. Everyone says practice makes perfect. I don't think that's true, right? Charles
No,
Barkley, another
practice makes
basketball player,
permanent.
yeah. Charles Barkley's got a really bad golf swing because he just never fixed it. And he practices that, but it's not perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Doing something over and over and over until you get it right. And it may take you a significantly longer amount of time than doing it however you naturally want to do it. But if you try to do it the right way, it will pay off. A lot of times it pays off in the end. And so yeah, that's something I think about is he actually wasn't as just naturally talented as other people and he just worked harder. And yeah, that's what people talk about, that Mamba mentality. So for yourself, you're saying you do research, you try to understand things. I'd be curious on your end if you have an example of a time where maybe you leaned into something that wasn't natural, right? But you had to do it. Right. We didn't, for the people who are listening, we don't prep on a lot of these questions. So I don't know. I'm just curious.
No.
Like, do you have something that comes to mind that you had to force yourself to do, similar to Kobe, to say, like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it this way. And however else I wanted to do it, whatever was natural before, I have to disregard it.
So here's the thing. When, like, a lot of people, they practice what they're good at, and sometimes people don't pay attention to, like, what are my mechanisms for managing, like, when things go off the rail, like
Mm,
like problems that come up. I mean, obviously, like, if you're a basketball player, that's part of what you're practicing is when problems come up. But whenever it comes to like the tech industry, maybe you're practicing your React coding or your visual design or your site maps. Um, you know, you need to be able to have a system for when things go askew.
mm,
And when someone makes a request that maybe you don't know the answer to that request, you have to be able to say, like, okay, when I request that I don't understand or that I don't know what's going on, I then say, like, okay, I'm going to find this out for you, or I'm going to execute this for you. Let's make sure that we have a shared understanding of what the question and results are going to be. And then, I will do some research and I will get back to you with a better answer. I've done that in client meetings, because, as much as I know, there are lots of things that I don't know. And sometimes I just have to be able to say, like, don't know. It's okay that I don't know. and
Mm,
that I have team members. Like this is part of the reason why it's great to work with as part of a team is that you can go to those team members and say, I need help with this.
mm,
I need your expertise. Like that's the in my opinion, that's the flip side of imposter syndrome. Like imposter syndrome, like pops in because you're around all of these like titans who know all of these things and you feel like you don't belong. But the reality is that there are titans in certain places and they also need help in other areas.
mm,
And they may view you as a fellow titan because of what you know, not because of what you don't know. It's the adage of like, like whenever you follow someone on Instagram, you only see their Instagram life. You don't see the
yeah.
problems or, that they're going through. And so like whenever you encounter something that maybe makes you feel like an imposter, one of the best things that you can do is actually have a framework to deal with that kind of
Hmm,
situation where it's like, okay, how can I like get an answer for this? Know that it's okay that you don't immediately have an answer for it. Like,
mm,
I attend a lot of meetings and I will admit I generally have answers pretty quick. I think on my feet really well. But there are some times whenever I have to go like, you know what? I'm going to get you an extended answer or a real answer to this question. And I need time in order to do that. And if you set up expectations, you can
mm.
that helps with like dealing with those sorts of situations. So yeah,
I,
that's yeah.
I think that's a great way to manage. I mean, at least for me, someone asked me recently, uh, brought up, been, I've been told a few times, people are like, you're really good at managing conflict. And part of that for me, I mean, that's, maybe that's true for some folks. Maybe other people are like, no, he stinks at it, whatever. But this person believed I was pretty decent at it. Well, one of the things for me is I almost always, when I feel like, okay, there's going to be some sort of conflict, a lot of times I've noticed people, I'm like, hey, if you think this is coming around, what are you going to do about it? And people are like, the most often answer, and there's a lot of merit to thinking this way. So I'm not knocking it, but I hear a lot. They're like, oh, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And my mindset is, well, if you think something's going to happen, start thinking about it. Start thinking about what you're going to say. Specifically, that's something I saw for a long, long time ago, saying, if you think that this person is going to come at you with this approach, think about that. Because if you can be, one of the worst things you can do in a lot of confrontational situations is let your emotions get the best of you and just start saying things. But also, it might not be great to say nothing at all, right? And turn the other cheek and not say anything. If there's a way you can think through beforehand, deal with those emotions if that should happen, deal with sit in with it's okay to be uncomfortable thinking about it and say, "Well, what will I say if this happens?" Process that, deal with it and say, "Okay, well, I'd probably say A, B, and C." And you can say so in a logical manner and maybe and look, it's fine to have some emotion and it's also and maybe and you're also if you're thinking about it beforehand you might also be able to have a better opportunity to see it from that person's perspective as well and say like, oh, okay, they're probably going to be saying it because of this reason and I get it, instead of being in the moment thinking, well, you're attacking me, right? And I think it's really similar to that with imposter syndrome. When you're feeling that way, well, it's the same thing as when someone's coming at you. There's some fight or flight that's been triggered, and you probably want to run. You feel uncomfortable. And so if you start thinking about that moment beforehand and what you're going to do, right? Like thinking about when I go to the gym, well, all these people are going to be thinking about me, this and that. Well, start thinking about that. Why? Why do I think everyone's going to be thinking about me when I walk through those doors? Well, because I'm not as cut and this and that. It's like, okay, well, the odds are probably very few of those people are actually thinking about you. And the ones that are, it's like those weren't your friends anyway. So like to heck with them. Right? Like you're not going to the gym
Yeah,
for those people. You're going because you want to be fit for the people you do care about and stay around, stay alive, and not go to Long John Silver's and start the process all over again. Right. So
right.
premeditating, thinking about these things before they occur, I think is so helpful.
Absolutely. And so I lead a team, and one of the things that I try to do with my team members is I want to like cut off any imposter syndrome that they might have.
Mm,
And I do this for every new hire at Four Kitchens because as a director, I get to meet everybody who gets hired. I get like a one-on-one meeting like during their first weeks.
that's
And one
cool.
of the things that yeah, it is. One of the things that I explicitly tell people is that you are here because you are a talented individual who has skills that will make Four Kitchens better.
Mm,
And I explicitly tell them this because I've had I've a lot of friends at other businesses. I've got a lot of friends at Four Kitchens who have experienced imposter syndrome, and anything that I can do to help make sure that they don't feel that.
mm,
I like to push, and I don't say like, well, you might have imposter syndrome, so I want to let you know that you're here because you're skilled, because then it sounds like that's weird. But I just remind everyone, like, you made it through the hiring process because we want you to be here because of the skills that you have.
mm,
And sometimes if we see our peers or our reports or our friends going through imposter syndrome, it's nice to remind people and say, like, listen, you got there for very important reasons. It's
mm.
like, you are
Yeah.
there because of this, that, or another thing. So, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just my just want to be nice to everybody and like hug everybody in the world, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that like imposter syndrome sucks. And so
Yeah.
flip it.
But I also want to open the door to going like, I want to go back to the Star Wars thing for a second. And
Sure.
there is merit. And I think people talk about, there's this notion around confidence, and people get it mixed up with cockiness a lot. Part of confidence for me is knowing, like, okay, here's all these things I'm good at. And then also, here's all these things I suck at. So, the very first podcast I was ever asked to produce, I was asked, "Can you do this?" And I'd never, for this business that I was, running digital media for. And it was really important to the business that I do well. And I said, "Yes, I can do it." In my mind, I'm like, "I don't no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out." And so there's merit to saying, like, you just like as you just mentioned, they asked you to do it for a reason, but it doesn't mean you're good at it. Right? So you just
Mhm.
said, like, yeah, believe in yourself. You're good at this thing, this and that. There's going to be a lot of times, like maybe like this Star Wars show, to say, "Hey, there's so much merit to say, maybe I don't know what I'm doing here, but having that confidence to say, I'm going to figure it out. Maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm going to leverage, you talked about it a second ago. Maybe I'm going to leverage my team. What resources can I pull together to help get this thing done?" Had a manager once that said, like, if I gave you a task, I don't really care if you're the one to do it. I just care that, you were the person that helped make sure it got done, whatever that meant.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think that's a big thing with saying, you know what, if you can take whatever that task is and you take that feeling of being uncomfortable with imposter syndrome and you can say to yourself, you know what, no, I don't know what I'm doing here, but dang it, I'm going to figure it out somehow, some way. This thing's going to happen. Right. There's a lot of power in that belief. And Kobe Bryant, with going back on him for a second, always said, you miss every shot that you don't take. And he always said, yeah, I'd miss this shot. Immediately think, okay, next one. Okay, next one. So no going in, believe in yourself. I'm going to make every shot I shoot today. And the ones you miss, forget about them, learn from them. Why did you miss? Okay, move on.
Mhm.
Don't do that thing again. Keep shooting. And so the more at bats you take and having that belief in yourself, I think it helps really quiet that voice permanently that says,
Mhm.
you're lesser. You can't do it. And you say, yeah, maybe I can't do it, but it's going to get done by me or somebody else. And I'm going to be a contributing part in making sure that happens. So let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to the story, and I don't know if this is a true story or not, but about the potting class where it's like, hey, you can either be graded on like the quantity of pots that you make or a single pot that you make.
Mm,
And the the moral of that story is that the people who were trying to perfect one pot really just didn't have enough experience because they were really working on like one or two pots, but they were trying to make it perfect. Whereas the person who made like that, like the people who made thousands of pots in the class
Hmm.
or hundreds of pots, I don't know what a good number is for number of pots thrown in a pottery class. Um, they ended up being better because they had thrown hundreds of pots and they had experience dealing with all of the problems that came up, and
Mm.
they like got more of the basics foundations done because they were like just doing it and getting it done. And like for me, whether or not that's a true story or not, the moral of it sits with me, and that like do it. Just if you feel like you're an imposter, but you're tasked with something, um, there's a whole internet out there to help you.
Mm.
Hop on YouTube and find an instructional video. Like I am not really good with like repair stuff, but I tell you what, I replaced the axle on the wheel of my lawnmower thanks to YouTube. And like
Yeah.
you know so like there's a lot of help that you can get out there to do things and get things done.
Now on the flip side, I had a buddy who he has done that twice. Most recently, well, two instances ago, he tried to fix his van door, which just meant his sliding van door was permanently crooked because of what a video he watched on YouTube. Turns out a lot harder than the one video he watched. And then he also tried to fix his Nintendo Switch and kind of broke that too. So YouTube videos are great, but then what he did next, right? He said, okay, he tried something, and there's a lot of merit. If everyone did this, I think the world would be a better place. He said, before I ask anyone for any help, I'm going to try to do a little digging and I'm going to try to learn it myself. He tried, failed both times, but then he was able to go to, and the first one was a mechanic, and say, I tried this. This is what happened. Now he's gone to an expert and he's asking better questions. He's going to pay that person to fix
Yes.
it, but he's also going to learn. He's like, I did this. Why didn't it work? He's like, well, I he probably didn't talk like this, but in my mind, like, well, you need to make sure you put the sliding door on this, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
He explained it to him, and then he got it fixed because he took the time to Google it first. He asked a more informed question and it stuck. And so now he's like, oh, I don't know, if anyone has a problem with their van door, now I know all these things to not do. And what you
Yeah.
actually should do to make sure you do it right. So yeah, he usually going that YouTube route. It might fail at first, but then he asks better questions and now he knows he's more of an expert than I'll ever be because I immediately just take it to a mechanic to fix. So tons of merit there. But for the folks who are listening in today, and they're not checking out, first off, you're not checking out the YouTube channel, you should do that. But really, just be sure you
Absolutely.
come on in and chat with us every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. Check out the YouTube channel. This is Design a Good Company. We got a LinkedIn group. Maybe we'll stay there. Maybe we'll go to Discord. I don't know what we're gonna do, but I want to hear from y'all. What do you think? Or do you struggle with imposter syndrome? Is there something we didn't talk about today that we should be hitting on that are like that is a key variable? Or how more importantly, what is a way you've overcome imposter syndrome for yourself? We'd love to hear it. Be sure to chat with us. We want to keep these conversations going. Next week, what are we talking about, man? What are we talking about? Next week, we are talking about Hmm. How to avoid deceptive design patterns. So we'll see.
Yes.
See what that actually means. We're gonna be talking about that. Maybe a little bit of the Wall Street Journal. How we're use that as some examples. So lots of good stuff. You're not gonna want to miss it. Randy, thanks for doing this with me today, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've had a great time today. It's a great Friday. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week.
All right. With that, we'll see y'all soon.
Bye.